We're going to talk about worrying noises coming out anyway, that we might dive headfirst back into some kind of full-throttle COVID restrictions. Alexandra, first and foremost, though, why are we being led by a bunch of dullards?
Well, that's what people forget about authoritarianism. It's very dull and boring. It's led by the worst, least qualified people on the planet. And what you've just described is Australian politics. And the only difference is that you couldn't give that speech on Australian TV because our journalists are just as dull as the politicians. And that is the truth of it.
Fair enough. Now, I am hearing worrying concerns that it's becoming, indeed, some people on our Health Select Committee are saying we should reintroduce things like social distancing, mask wearing, working from home, enforced isolation if you decide that you're going to test positive or at least do a COVID test, for example. Is this a worrying, slippery slope to the bottom yet again?
Well, look, I thought we all agreed after the last 2 years that the worst thing you could possibly do is follow the health advice as far as locking people down and enforcing all these restrictions. And in Australia, we've got the same problem where we've got half our health officials want to stop people coming from China and reintroduce all the mask wearing and everything. And the other half think that's racist. So now we have the only consistency in the health advice and the settled science is that it's political science and that it keeps changing depending on public opinion.
We've got to do it because we've got to protect our beloved NHS. Now, I was under the impression that I went about my life acting normally, behaving normally, and if I ever needed it, the NHS would be there to protect me. But now, the roles are reversed. I have to behave in a way that at all times protects the NHS, even, believe it or not, being warned against going for a long jog. Now, that's something that's never particularly troubled me in my past, but I'd like to have the option, Alexandra. I would like to have the option. But I believe you've managed to dig out a story that highlights the fact that the NHS is always in a bit of strife, isn't it?
Yes, I found a story from 21 years ago published in The Guardian that could have been written yesterday about how the health crisis of the last 2 years for the flu is crushing the NHS. Now, you talk about not going out for a jog, but one article I read this morning advised people not to go out for dates with their lovers inside because that could be a little bit dangerous. So the health advice to protect the NHS is somewhat confusing and I'd say a little bit risque.
Well, indeed. I mean, I won't ask what would be particularly risky about the dates, of course, although it would save a lot of blokes a lot of money. Although the way the world's going at the minute, I suppose the woman would have to pay for it. I don't know. The world's gone mad, hasn't it? But are you a bit sick and tired of this constant NHS and hospital-based doom-mongering? I mean, the fact is, if you get ill, it's not great. Hopefully someone will save your life, but you can't live your life in fear, can you?
No, and look, the reason the NHS is crumbling under the pressure is the same reason your roads are chock full of cars. It's because you've got too many people being poured into the system, and Australia has the same problem, but to a slightly lesser extent in that we haven't had as many open borders as you have, but still the problem remains. Too many people, too stressed system, and that is what is crushing the NHS. And until Rishi Sunak actually comes to that agreement and he understands that he just needs to build physically more hospitals or send some of those hundreds of thousands of people home, that is the only way you'll get your hospital system back.